Okay, so good evening, everyone. It's great to see you all. So, there were a few people who submitted some questions and topics for today. And we also had some leftover topic from maybe 2 months ago. And it was about the difference between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhism. Because between these traditions, there's often either mutual criticism or misunderstanding. And actually, for someone who's just approaching Buddhism, who's beginning to learn about it, it can sometimes be really confusing because of the perspective of each of these traditions can be a bit different. So we have that left over, and then we have a question about karma. What is karma? What is volition? The Buddhist term is xing and ye. So volition and karma, is it the same? Is it different? And then how do we live with it? What does this have to do with our life? Also connected to that, connected to the explanation of karma, and this is the middle way. Madhyamaka or Zhongguan means middle way, and this is one way to explain the whole the whole of Buddha Dharma. This is one angle to look at it, and this is the perspective that's often connected with the term emptiness or kong or empty nature. So this will look at karma, volition or intentional action, and how this fits in the whole picture of the middle way. The third question, which is actually a very practical one, it has to do with method. So the third question has to do with silent illumination. Someone just asked, can you talk a little bit about it again? And just explain how to use this method of no method, because we can say it's one of the or the simplest approach to practice, which actually can make it the most difficult to approach. I'll introduce that or review how to approach that method. And in doing that, I hope to tie together what I talk about with this whole middle way and karma. How to look at karma, the middle way, and actually practice it in our life. We can discuss that in terms of silent illumination or mo zhao chan. Okay, let's dive in. So, karma in general, the concept of karma wasn't invented by the Buddha. This idea of karma existed in Indian traditions for long before that. But in general, karma means action. Chinese is ye. And by the way, if you're studying from both traditions of Buddhism, in Theravada they use Pali, which is kamma, Kamma, and then in Mahayana Buddhism they use Sanskrit. So the English spelling is karma, Karma. It's the same. So karma means action, but it's intentional action because we also have accidental action. And it's important to know that accidental action is not included in this stricter definition. So it's anything we do with a clear intention. I want to do something, I want to get some kind of outcome, and we act. So karma could be an action of not only speech and bodily action, behavior, but it can also be mental action, thinking. So speech and behavior are very clear, right? We can use all kinds of words to speak, and depending on our intention, the words can have different effects. So if we're angry when we speak, even if we say something that the content is pretty or sounds nice, if we're angry, it's going to have a very different effect than if we had a peaceful state of mind or kindness, kind of attitude of kindness. For example, if I just said, "Oh, you're a wonderful person." If I was very angry when I said that, it would come out very different than if I had a peaceful mind, right? In modern terms, when someone says something nice, but they actually mean something harmful, what do we call that? It's passive aggressive, right? Right. Sounds nice, but it's actually mean. And then behavior, if we kill something, is it always bad? Especially if we're cleaning our house and we kill bugs. In the Buddhist tradition, should we feel bad about it? Should we, criticize ourselves for killing bugs when we're just cleaning the house and we want to make sure there's no roaches in the kitchen? Well, the intention is the thing that matters most. So if we hate roaches, we hate them and we want to kill all of them. And as we're killing these roaches, we're filled with anger. We're screaming and shouting and, crushing them with our boots. It's quite a different kind of action, and it generates quite a different consequence. Well, one consequence, the roaches are going to get killed either way, right? If we kill them with compassion, we say, well, sorry guys, but this is my house, this is my pantry, this is my fridge. You can't eat this stuff. And since you won't leave just with this pleasant, invitation to leave, I'm going to have to kill you. Sorry. That's you know, of course you're not going to have conversations with roaches, but with that kind of attitude, we're just killing to keep a clean environment. It's also a very different effect because we have kindness in our mind, even though we're killing or at least trying to get them out, the effect is different. So if we um, kill with anger, we actually develop a tendency to be angry and to kill more. So let's just use, instead of killing, since many of us or most of us are probably not killing on a regular basis, but let's just say scolding people or just speaking angrily, yelling at people. If we yell with anger in our mind, if we yell because we're angry or we're impatient, which I even have the tendency to be impatient sometimes, and I'll maybe say something nasty. So when we do that, we not only uh, affect other people with our speech, but we also develop this tendency to be angry or to be impatient. And we develop a tendency to act on it, to let it out. If we yell, but our intention is actually just to help someone, we don't have anger in our mind. We actually have compassion or an intention to help. That yelling is quite different, and it's kind of like if you've ever played sports, the coaches are always yelling at people. Coaches could be angry, but some coaches just need to use a loud voice or a strong tone of voice to encourage their athletes, right? Encouragement can come in the form of a yell. And especially in the Chan tradition, you may have read that many of the Chan masters would use shouting and even hitting to encourage their disciples. And shouting is one thing. Hitting, they weren't okay. Yes, there were some punches and kicks here and there, but most of the hitting is done with a very thin piece of wood. It's more just like a slap on the shoulder, a slap on the back. Teachers weren't going around beating their students indiscriminately. It was encouragement. So, action, whether it's speech or bodily behavior, an action of our thought or our mind, all of this is karma when it's done intentionally. And whatever the intention, there will be a corresponding effect, which I think we can all relate to, right? If we have a habit of getting angry, it'll just continue and it'll probably get stronger. Some people I've had discussions with about people they know who the more they age, it seems like the worser temper they have. And of course, it's not true for everyone. It's just not. It's not a matter of aging, but it's a matter of aging, or it's a matter of continuing this habit, and it gets stronger over time. So people who, whether they're Buddhist or not, people who don't necessarily have a strong self-awareness, and they speak habitually, they act habitually, they live their life habitually, habits just get stronger and stronger. And that's the accumulation of karma. Chinese is 集, yeah, the 聚集, the second noble truth, 集, it's the same 集 that's like a collection of books. Karma as accumulation, it's the accumulation of these tendencies of in our intentions. Whatever we say, do, and think, it's like a giant boulder rolling downhill. And the less awareness we have, the easier these tendencies can go out of control. And when we have very limited awareness, and technically every one of us, or every ordinary being, is ignorant. So that term in Buddhism, ignorance, refers to this lack of awareness. It's not just that we're stupid or we're lacking knowledge, we're all lacking awareness. We're lacking awareness of what? Of our intentions, of our speech and our action, which we could argue and say, I know what I'm doing. I'm aware of what I'm doing. I know when I move my hands. I know when I move my body. I know what I'm saying. But it's interesting on a course level, there's a lot of movements of our body that we're not aware of. We move habitually. We scratch, we move, we fidget. We don't even know what our posture is like a lot of the time. That's all habitual behavior. Or speech. Sometimes we're just like with people we're very comfortable with, and it's very easy to not like pay attention to what we're saying, and we just talk. And um, a friend I was with mentioned that like for a few seconds she didn't even realize what she was saying. And I think she was humming a song or something. And this happens to all of us. There are just lapses of awareness where even speech and bodily behavior we're unaware of. And of course, thoughts. Thoughts are the most subtle kind of behavior, right? There's so many thoughts, including intentions, that we're not clearly aware of. We may have a lot of mixed intentions. So when we go to talk to someone, we can tell ourselves, okay, I don't like this person, but I'm going to be nice to them today. So if there's someone at work we don't like, okay, I actually hate this person, but I have to see them every day. Okay, I'm going to be nice to this person today. But at the same time of wanting to be nice, the old habitual tendency of like, oh God, why does this person always talk like that? I really want to say something nasty and just like poke them because they deserve it. That intention can get mixed in with the intention of, oh, I want to be a nice person today. So karma or intentional action, that's volition. It's all volition. It happens with a lack of awareness, and it accumulates these tendencies. These sometimes is described as habitual energy, 习气. They just continue to roll like a snowball, accumulating snow as it rolls down a hill. So that's karma. Karma and karmic force. 业 and 业力. So karma and the force of karma, or we could also describe it as the inertia of our mind. So especially when we're just sitting and meditating, why does our mind keep moving? Why does it keep thinking even when we don't want it to? That's karma. That's karmic force showing up, right in our face. We want to just take a break from thinking and worrying and even being angry, but it won't stop. And we're often unaware of when our mind goes off in these trains of wandering thought or trains of delusive thought, confused thinking. Even though we want to stop, we can't. That's karmic force. So I'm just going to introduce karma up to that point and see if does that all make sense? Anybody have questions about that? Nobody has questions or anything to comment or share? Then what we'll do is we'll look at this chart, this Madhyamaka chart, which is a detailed explanation of, at the center, the 12 links. It's called the 12 links of conditioned arising, Shar Inyuan, or it's the 12 conditioned phenomenon. That's the basic phenomenon of suffering. This is Buddhism's most basic Buddhist psychology, is the 12 links. So if you've seen teachings on consciousness, the Buddhist teachings on consciousness only, or the Theravada teachings of Abhidharma, that's the detailed Buddhist philosophy, but it's actually all based on this core of the 12 links. So I'll go over it pretty briefly today, just to introduce this chart, and in the future you can look into the detailed, detailed explanations on your own time. But if we start at the top right, this is coming from the core teachings of all Buddhism. So every single Buddhist path and tradition still sees the Four Noble Truths as the core. Because the Four Noble Truths are just talking about suffering, the reality of our human experience, where there's all kinds of happiness, sadness, ups and downs, and a kind of dissatisfaction that's just hard to get out of. Four Noble Truths are suffering, the cause, the potential to be free from it, and then the path. The Madhyamaka teaching, Zhongguan, the core teaching of Madhyamaka, is emptiness. Emptiness meaning that everything is without any kind of permanent self. Everything comes about because of different conditions. So everything arises conditionally, and it's without any independent self. Nothing anywhere exists by itself, of itself. Everything everywhere depends on everything else, essentially, in order for it to exist. So every plant, right? Every flower, every beautiful flower or tree depends on its environment, the sun, the rain, the soil, other microorganisms for that plant to be alive. And every one of us is just like that. All of us, although we have a limited kind of independence, where if we want to go here, we go here. If we want to go there, we go there. We're actually still quite dependent, because even if we want to go somewhere, we need a way to get there. We either need a vehicle to bring us, or even if we have our feet and we can walk, we still need a path. If there's a mountain in front of us, we can't just get where we want to get. Thankfully, people have made paths through the mountains or roads through our cities and villages. So even though we have some mobility in terms of our bodily behavior, speech, and mind, ultimately, even if we could walk and climb the tallest mountain, we still would need to breathe. We depend on air to breathe and nutrition to have any energy to get anywhere. And we also need the knowledge of which direction to go in. So if we want to climb a mountain, we've never done it before, what do? We Google it, or we get a map, or we get a hiking book, or we ask somebody who's done it before, right? How do we hike this trail? What's the best trail? And they tell us. So even if we have the capacity to hike it, to scale it, to get to the top, and we feel like, wow, I'm so awesome because I scaled this mountain, I'm so capable and healthy and strong, we couldn't have done any of it without all of the help of everyone else to get us there, and the help of non sentient beings like air and soil and nutrition for us to do anything. So this is emptiness. Emptiness is not some kind of state of nothingness or a state of some escape into spiritual bliss. Emptiness is just the fact that everything everywhere depends on many different conditions and causes to exist and to function. With this in mind, Madhyamaka, and one of the main teachers of this Madhyamaka tradition that of course, the Buddha gave teachings on emptiness, but there was a teacher a few generations or a few centuries after the Buddha called Nagarjuna. The Chinese is Long Shu. He was an Indian philosopher, monk, practitioner who used the basic logic of emptiness to look at even Buddhism and point out that every concept, every teaching, every phenomenon, even if it's nirvana, the goal of Buddhism, nirvana, he said that's also empty. He said suffering is empty and nirvana is also empty. At first, it's like, wait a second. The Four Noble Truths said there's suffering and there's cessation, which is nirvana, freedom. Nagarjuna said, okay, that's fine, but suffering is empty. Nirvana is also empty, meaning suffering is not a thing. It's not some sort of barrier or obstacle over here on one side. And then nirvana is also not a thing or a state or a place where we can escape suffering and go to nirvana and just be in the spiritual bliss. He said that's totally incorrect if you think that. And what he was doing was actually trying to correct the the teachings that came out of 部派 佛教, which means the many schools of Buddhism. So after the Buddha passed away, everybody tried to figure out his teachings and systematize it and present it, right? So there were centuries of this different schools of Buddhism. And Theravada, which is the only one that survived, Theravada is the oldest surviving school of the many schools of Buddhism. And Theravada and these other schools of Buddhism looked at suffering and nirvana as opposites. Suffering and nirvana are seen as opposite to each other. Suffering is here in the world, having a human body and a human mind, or a living being's body and mind. Nirvana is escaping the world or getting out of the world, right? To a place of freedom and bliss where there is no body and mind. A kind of state that it's very hard to define, but it was something that was outside of birth and death and body and feelings and thoughts. There's none of that in nirvana of the Theravada teaching. The earlier basic teachings of Buddhism, which are quite dualistic because they're based on suffering and this world of birth and death is here. Ultimate nirvana is outside of it. So that's why you see um, teachings of, especially in the Theravada tradition, where the ultimate bliss is beyond life and death, where you could say after this person dies, there's no more coming to rebirth. That's a common phrase. The liberated person, it says 所作已办, 具足佛法, 所作已办. 不受后有, which means the liberated person has done what needed to be done. They've learned what they needed to learn. They're liberated. There's no more returning to another life. Where did they go? Nirvana. Where is Nirvana? We don't know. It's not a place, but it's outside of birth and death. Well, who is the Arhat anyway, if there's no self? Those are all questions that can't be answered concretely. But the idea is that Nirvana is this kind of existence that's beyond existence, but it's clearly not birth and death. There's no body, there's no mind, there's no people, there's no animals, there's none of that. So it's dualistic. Are you with me so far? Okay, this is like quick review of all of basic Buddhism and now to Madhyamaka. Madhyamaka or Nagarjuna came along and said, wait a second, you guys got the Buddha's teaching all wrong. We're not trying to go to nirvana. We're not trying to get someplace and escape life and death. He said, actually, nirvana is here. Samsara is here. Nirvana is also here. In other places, he said, there's no difference really between nirvana and samsara. Samsara is living our life with ignorance. We suffer. We have all kinds of problems. We get angry. We get happy, but then we get angry again. We yell at people when we don't want to. We do things that we know are bad. We can't control ourselves. That's suffering. That's the world of birth and death, samsara. He pointed out when we have wisdom, we're free. We're free from all those tendencies of karma. We don't act based on being driven by these tendencies. We're free from karmic tendencies. So in this very life, or in every life, or whatever is after this life, he said that's nirvana. Nirvana is just wisdom. And he said more concretely, nirvana is the wisdom of emptiness. I know there's going to be a lot to digest all at once. This took me years of uh, organization to clarify all of this. But from the Mahayana perspective, nirvana is not something outside of this life or this world. Nirvana is just a life of wisdom and freedom. Because of realizing emptiness, that everything everywhere is interdependent, and it's impossible to find any kind of permanent self or separate self. It's just impossible. When we can realize that, we let go of all of these concepts. We even let go of every concept of Buddhism, and we even let go of the concept of emptiness. And that's when we're really free. The mind is free, even free of Buddhism. And the term he uses is 觉诸细论. 觉 is 断绝. It means to end all of this useless theorizing or useless speculation about reality, about life. This is his closing statement, that since everything is empty, nothing can be conceptualized. So all of these theories and speculation is ended, and the mind is at peace, free from the duality of even samsara and nirvana, or suffering and somehow escape from suffering. The duality of good and bad. In most religions and in most philosophy, good and bad is just very clear. It's spelled out. This is what is good and this is bad. This behavior is good, this behavior is good, that one's bad. And it's always good and it's always bad. In Buddhism, especially from the Madhyamaka perspective, it's like, yeah, there's conventionally good and there's conventionally bad. We don't want to kill people. That's bad. And it's good to help people and help people survive if they're suffering, right? It's conventionally good and conventionally bad. But what Madhyamaka reminds us is that if we get fixated on ultimate good and bad, actually we lose wisdom because we're blinded by this concept of good and bad. And actually, we may end up creating harm even if we want to do good. So, for example, like before, we're saying, it's when we yell at people, that often causes suffering and problems, right? It's not good to go around just yelling and shouting at people. So, cursing, many traditions and even Buddhism says cursing is bad. But actually, maybe there's at some point, if you curse at someone, you could really help them. If you yell at someone and you curse at someone, there could be a situation where that's really helpful. One simple one is if someone's about to cross the street and walk into a bus, what are we going to do? Shout. It's like, stop. Maybe you'll curse, but the curse is probably not necessary in that situation. But we shout, right? Look out for the bus. You know, that's a simplistic example of when yelling could help the person stop from getting hurt. But maybe another situation is where we know someone who is really struggling with some kind of situation. What comes to mind is like substance use or substance abuse. If we're too polite and too kind and too soft, maybe that person won't get the message that what they're doing is a problem. Maybe actually yelling, in some kind of situation, yelling or shouting can wake someone up. If we shout, but we have compassion in our heart, we're not angry. We're shouting, you have to stop. It's like a wake up call to the person that may help them turn away from their substance use or abuse, right? So we can go into many different examples, but I think you get the point where if something is ultimately good or bad, a behavior, we can get stuck actually and suffer a lot because um, we're fixated on rules and guidelines. Where this teaching of the middle way is going beyond the extremes of good and bad, right and wrong, or beyond the attachment to ultimate right and ultimate wrong, ultimate good and ultimate bad, so that we just do what's necessary based on the conditions. So, this is like the more practical look at causes and conditions. So, in this situation, what do we do? Do we go to our, Buddhist sutra and says, okay, what do I do in this situation? Um, we're often not going to find it. Madhyamaka is saying if we rely on wisdom, if we can see clearly the conditions, we just know what to do. And maybe yelling is helpful. Maybe even fighting is helpful, or some sort of physical violence is helpful. Could be. So this is the real deeper meaning of the middle way. Middle way just doesn't mean moderation, right? I think in Chinese there's is it 中庸之道? That's moderation, right? Don't eat too much of this, don't eat too much of that. It's a good diet. 中庸之道. Don't eat too much sugar, don't eat too much fat. Is it? Okay. Okay. So I won't approach it from that concept if it is different, if it is a misconception. But the Zhongdao of Buddhism is also not just moderation, where the early teaching of the Buddha when he was practicing alone, he practiced a lot of asceticism, which is basically starving yourself, eating as little as possible. He realized that was eventually harming himself. So that's one extreme, asceticism. The other extreme was what? Yeah, hedonism. It's just like self indulgence. Eat as much as you want, play as much as you want, have as much fun as you want. His life as a prince was indulgence. His life as an ascetic was self harm. The middle way, some people saw as, oh well, he just he didn't indulge himself too much, and he didn't do too much asceticism. It was just like a little bit of both. He could enjoy himself and have a bigger bowl of rice if he wanted to, or whatever. But it actually means just neither asceticism nor hedonism. It just means you eat as much as you need in that context. What were the causes and conditions? Well, we need to eat. Those are the conditions. How much do we eat? Well, we eat what we need. Does that mean the same amount every day? If it was the same amount every day, that would be an easy rule to follow. And some people like that. They like clear rules and clear guidelines. But wisdom reminds us that it's different every day. If you're more active today, you need more food. If we're less active today, we need less food. So wisdom is just doing what's necessary. Um, so it's not moderation, it's responding to the conditions. To go a little bit deeper, the middle way in Buddhism um, is, like I said before, beyond any concept, beyond concepts. That's the middle way. So, concepts, like some of the most basic concepts we have, are is and is not, right? Something exists or something doesn't exist. Like, I'm here, we're all here, we exist. When we die, we don't exist. This is basic dualism, right? Up, down, left, right, exists, doesn't exist, beginning, end. These are all concepts, and concepts by nature are dualistic. Madhyamaka points out that even the concepts of Buddhism, such as these 12, ignorance, volitions, consciousness, etc., all the way down to birth, aging, and death, all of those concepts, he said they're also empty. Every one of those concepts, every one of those phenomena are empty because birth and death are also just coming together or coming apart of conditions. So, birth, like the way we usually look at birth, right? Birth is the birth of something, the beginning of something, right? When we came out of our mother's womb as little babies, we existed, or we existed inside the womb as well. So we say, oh, I began inside my mother's womb. And I was born, I came out, you could see me. And then when I die, my body will crumble and uh, disintegrate. And then I won't exist. That's death. Is that a fair, like, basic consensus of how most people view birth and death? Right? Beginning and end. Madhyamaka says there's no birth and there's no death. And at first, it's kind of confusing because it's like, wait a second, are they like denying that like The baby comes out or the baby's in the womb, and then are they denying that the body disintegrates? No, not at all. Madhyamaka is just saying that whatever is born, whatever dies, is not a self. It's not a soul. There's nothing permanent about any being, whether it's birth or death. Because if we look at birth, it's like, yeah, you could say we started in the womb, but even before that, before even the sperm and the egg came together, all the conditions were still there. Our parents were there, but our parents also depended on everything else. Society was there, the world was there, the earth was there. All of those conditions just come together to create a new life. But it's not a completely brand new self. It's just the coming together of conditions and the evolution of those conditions, right? Like the sperm and the egg, it's really amazing whenever I just think about it, right? These two little tiny cellular things evolve into like this huge complicated being. It's amazing. But is there any part of this being that is by itself? Or that just like begins all of a sudden? Hup, here we are. I've begun. And then when we die, psh, we're gone. Because when we die, all the conditions just come apart. Our body disintegrates. Whatever is left of our mind, we could say that also disintegrates or it continues in some form. So there's no beginning or end. The phenomena of birth and death, yeah, there's stuff happening, but it's not a true birth. It's not an ultimate beginning, and it's not a true death. It's not an ultimate end. That's what Madhyamaka or Zhongdao is pointing at. There's no birth and death. There's just coming together of conditions and coming apart of conditions infinitely through time and space. So it's basically reducing every concept that we can come up with. The tradition of Madhyamaka will find a way to cut it down by just saying even that concept is based on different conditions. You could try it. You could think of any concept, anything that seems to be by itself. We could look at it and see that it's not a self. It's just causes and conditions together. Well, the conditions for ignorance aren't there. If the conditions are there again, then ignorance will exist. If the conditions aren't there, then it won't manifest. It won't be. Yeah, and to make it more concrete, it's when we're aware. And when we're fully aware of the working of our mind, we won't be confused by concepts, by thinking, by the idea of death. Because I think to some extent we're all afraid of death. We don't want to become nothing. Or maybe we believe we'll go someplace else bad. We don't want to end up someplace bad. Yeah. So whether or not we are enlightened or the onlooker is enlightened, um, would you want to stop someone from suffering, experiencing suffering? If you knew they were going to walk into whether it's a bus or they're going to figuratively walk into some pain and suffering, would you stop them if you saw it happening, about to happen? The middle way doesn't deny that just because death isn't an ultimate end, it still acknowledges that people experience suffering because they're ignorant, and that with death, we don't know where they're going to end up, and that life is just a continuation. But if we can help people and we can help ourselves be more wise or be more self-aware and and reduce suffering. So that's the meaning of there's no suffering. It doesn't mean we don't experience actual suffering and anger and all these problems. We experience it, but it's all changing, and it can cease. It can uh, end. So suffering is not a fixed state, right? Because it can cease. When conditions cease, suffering ceases, right? So the tricky thing is when we look at this, theoretically, and I think we'll stop the theory here, because the further we get into theory, we're all looking at this conceptually. We're all trying to wrap our minds around it. And it's just like, oh my God, so wait a second. First there's suffering, now there's no suffering. First there's birth and death, now there's no birth and death. Madhyamaka is just helping us to let go of concepts so we can experience directly, right? We can experience uh, wisdom or experience no wisdom directly. And this is a great transition to silent illumination. This is where we take all this stuff and we could look at it in terms of practice. So Theravada Buddhism and their methods, they're often analytical, and they use a lot of Buddha Dharma to contemplate when they sit in meditation. So they may reflect and become aware of the body and then contemplate how the body is not self, right? And reflect on the body is made of these different elements and so on. It's analytical, right? In many cases. It also contemplate how thoughts are impermanent. So they observe thoughts, and there's a bit of an analytical observation of thoughts are impermanent. They're not self, or they're not mine. When you get to Mahayana practice, we let go of all of these things, even Buddhist analysis. So meditation in Mahayana tradition is, I think we talked about it before, it's non-discriminating wisdom, 无分别智. So you don't use thinking and analysis in the moment of practice. When we study, we use thought, we use analysis just to get a clear direction. But when we practice, we let go of all of this stuff. So silent illumination really has no method. We don't think about even Buddhism. We don't analyze anything. We just sit, relax the body and mind. We let go of thinking. We let go of intentional thinking, right? In the beginning, karma is intentional thinking. We let go of intentional thinking, but thoughts still come and go, right? Why do thoughts still come and go? Inertia of the mind. So with silent illumination, just because we're not thinking intentionally doesn't mean thoughts just disappear, because the reality is we have all this inertia, mental inertia. So thoughts still come and go, and different emotions come and go, and different bodily sensations happen because of that. Some strong, some weak. With silent illumination, we just let it all happen, and we just sit there, very naturally aware of the happenings of the body and mind. Or to use the Madhyamaka terminology, we're aware of the causes and conditions arising and the causes and conditions ceasing of body and mind experience. So, why do we have certain thoughts? Why does a thought arise? Does it arise because of itself? No. It arises because of this momentum and because we've had similar thoughts before. When those conditions are sufficient, they arise. But if we don't fuel it, if we don't continue to, for example, when we sit, we think of an argument we just had and we start to think how we can win next time. And we start to plan and strategize. Let me see what I'm going to say next time to really make sure he or she agrees with me. That's when the karmic thinking starts to fuel those conditions. So that train of thought continues. With silent illumination, we're just aware of the thought as it arises, or the thought train. as it arises. Since we're not adding any karmic fuel, then those conditions eventually cease and the thought train passes. Our anger settles down, our strategizing on how to win calms and settles down. Um, Everything eventually settles down. We may feel very light and free, and maybe even experience a condition where no thoughts arise. Um, does that mean there's nothing? No. We're clearly aware of sitting there. A strong sound, just before another motorcycle went by. Silent illumination, sitting in meditation, we hear the rumble of the motorcycle. It's totally clear. We just don't add any reaction to it. If we say, I hate these motorcycles, then, the mind starts to churn again. If we just hear it, we don't react, the sound comes and the sound goes. That's conditions coming together and conditions ceasing. Ultimately, that's experiencing emptiness. If even the thought of ourself and, I'm here sitting, I'm so peaceful, and even the subtler thought of self is gone, but everything else about experience is still happening. Sounds, sights, feelings, um, thoughts can still happen as long as we don't take the thoughts to be ourself. There's no self center. There's no constant chronic self attachment at the center. But there's just thoughts arising, thoughts passing, feelings arising, feelings passing. That without any analysis, we just experience life as it unfolds, moment by moment. That's silent illumination, or that's the wisdom of emptiness in terms of just real experience. So, part of silent illumination, interestingly, is not only being aware, but actually ignoring things that we don't need to pay attention to, right? Like when we're sitting in meditation, we're just sitting. We don't need to pay attention to like an itch that shows up over here or a pain sensation over there. We often pay a lot of extra attention to these things that we don't need to pay attention to. So with silent illumination, we can let go of this excessive attention to things that don't concern us, and that also frees up our mind. So if you're interested more about silent illumination, of course, a retreat is the best thing. If you can do a week long or a longer retreat, it's so where we can experience it, how to be aware without this excessive attentiveness to particulars. And we master our mind that way. When we need to pay attention, we pay attention. When we don't need to, we just sit. We just relax. So Madhyamaka and silent illumination, the map that Madhyamaka provides goes very well with silent illumination because Madhyamaka is helping us just to let go of conceptualizing, trying to figure things out. When we can let go of all these concepts, we just experience life as it unfolds. And if we see someone about to get hit by a bus, if we're silently illuminating, if we're very clear, we help. We just naturally help. If we see somebody suffering, we can offer to help. We can offer to ask the person, how are you doing? But maybe the person doesn't want our help, and they just kind of give us a face, or they obviously don't want to talk. Maybe that's not the right time, so we don't help at that time. And that's wisdom, knowing when to help and when not to help. If in our minds we thought, well, Buddhism is teaching me to help, so I have to help all sentient beings, then I got to help this person. Why won't you let me help you? Why don't you want to talk? Just let's just talk about it. Come on, let's talk. You'll feel better. That's like we become a pushy bodhisattva, or, a pushy Buddhist, trying to help people when they just don't want help at the moment or maybe ever from us. But wisdom is just knowing in the moment we can observe, we can offer to help. If they obviously are pushing back, they don't want it, we can be like, okay, well, if you ever want to talk, I'm here for you. That's not getting caught in extremes, not relying on rules. Yeah, I could see where you're coming from. If we were thinking, oh, look, that person's suffering, they shouldn't suffer, I don't want them to suffer, and we actually, some of us may find it hard to allow that person to deal with their stuff. Like we feel uncomfortable with them suffering. That's more of what you're saying. Oh no, they shouldn't be suffering. I can't let them suffer. I don't like this, or I'm uncomfortable with this. Can't we just talk? That's being stuck in the idea that suffering is bad. If we're silently illuminating, we're just aware of, and we're speaking, so we have to use language. We're just aware of someone's suffering or distress. We respond naturally. It's not that suffering is bad. Actually, by them suffering, they eventually have wisdom. So from that angle, suffering is good. But they may need some help. And if we're wise, we know what to do, either to help or not to help. There was there's an old master, an old monk called Guangqin Lao和尚. He lived in I don't know where he was born, but he eventually lived in Taiwan and taught Buddha name recitation, actually, and to most people. And a lot of people would come to him to ask for help, and he would just say Amitofo. He would say like Nian Fo Chu. He'd tell them to recite the Buddha name. There's one story I remember where his student came to him and kept asking, what is selflessness, master? What does this mean? What is emptiness? What is selflessness? And the old monk just ignored him. He didn't reply. He didn't give a Dharma talk. He didn't explain. He just ignored him. And the student came back again. He's like, hey, master. The student was like, maybe he didn't hear me the first time. Hey, master, what is no self? And the old master ignored him again. This happened a number of times, up to the point where the student was so angry. And he's like, what's going on? Why are you not teaching me? What is no self? And the old master said something like, this is self. This right here, this is self. And the student suddenly realized something. And he realized his insistence on his master giving an answer is his self-centered, desire just to get an answer. And the old master appeared to not help him in the beginning, but actually it eventually helped the student. And the student had to suffer in order to have that kind of insight. So, especially in the Chan records, you see teachers using these skillful means, sometimes just helping relieve suffering right away, maybe sometimes creating a bit of suffering, creating a bit of confusion, or using a technique to help the student have to figure out something for themselves. So this is wisdom. There's no fixed rule to say, oh, the teacher should always just give answers. Maybe sometimes that teacher doesn't give an answer, even creates a conflict in order for the student to have an insight. right? Whereas the early sutras of the Buddha giving talks, the Buddha would just either give a talk, answer a question, but many times the Buddha would also ask questions. He would throw the question back, and it would become this dialectic, right? It was a conversation where the Buddha was throwing the question back at the person to help the person reflect. So, this is the middle way. There's no ultimate right or wrong way to do it. How to help, how to practice, but that ultimately, and especially not only from Madhyamaka, but the Chan tradition, all these words and concepts and emptiness and, they're just tools to point us in a direction, but the practice is to experience our life fully in every moment, whether it's sitting, walking, drinking tea, crossing the street, at work. If we experience life fully without all of this interjection of our self-centered thinking, we see the world very differently, and we're so much more free. For the person with wisdom, then the world is nirvana. For the person with a clouded mind and lots of attachments and fixations, the world is just suffering. It's samsara, right? So nirvana is not some other place in terms of Mahayana. It's not some other place. It's right here. So this is the middle way, the non-duality of samsara, nirvana. I see some faces and grimaces, some smiles, some grimaces. What are we feeling? What are we thinking? Whichever path or whichever system you find easier, you resonate with, that's the best one for you. So maybe some people just feel more comfortable with the Theravada approach because it's just very simple, concrete. Suffering is suffering, nirvana is nirvana, and it's very clear. And it's some people feel comfortable with that. Other people at some point feel that that can be kind of rigid, and there's some barriers there. So they prefer Mahayana teachings and practices. So it's really up to you. That's the middle way. Whichever one works best for you based on your situation now, that's the best um, study and the best practice. So this map is just presenting this kind of evolution of Buddhist thought. It all started with these basics, the Four Noble Truths, but then it branched. And as it branched, people presented it in different ways. And each presentation is suitable for a different kind of person, or the same person at a different stage or place in their practice. So whichever one works, that's the middle way.